Welcome to a brand new episode in the Science and Technology Unleashed series. My name is Rahul Ramzanli and I'll be your host for this episode. Maulana Hazrat has said, the energy challenge here and elsewhere will require a multifaceted response, including bold innovations in the way we both produce and consume energy. Join us as we explore the role and future of energy and our environment. Our first guest is Dr. Muradbek Lajbev, an assistant professor of Earth and Environmental Sciences at the University of Central Asia in Korek, Tajikistan. His research and scholarship are at the intersection of the human-environment interactions, spanning the areas of energy security, energy poverty, water resources management, environmental governance, and local indigenous knowledge. Dr. Lajbev holds a PhD in Natural Resources from Cornell University, a Master's in Public Policy degree from the National University of Singapore, and a Bachelor's degree in English Language from Korek State University, Tajikistan.
I am interested in human-environment relations, where humans impact the environment and are impacted by the environment. The central driving question is, how can humans improve their lives while using natural resources sustainably? The well-being of humans and the environment should go hand in hand, but as we all know, millions of people live in poverty and lack basic necessities such as clean drinking water or electricity, whereas on the other hand, environmental degradation from dumping of waste to destruction of natural habitats for other species to climate change and its impact on humans and ecosystems are the pressing challenges of our age. Within this broad range of sustainability, there are many issues to deal with. We have become a geological force changing the Earth system processes dramatically to the extent that it's been called the Anthropocene, the age of humans. We are present and actively influencing the ecosystems from the soil to the water to the air. In fact, a group of experts led by Johan Rockström, the director of the Stockholm Resilience Center, proposed the concept of planetary boundaries, with 9 boundaries including climate change, biodiversity, land use change, freshwater use, etc. It is suggested that if these boundaries are crossed, the changes could be destructive, putting survival of humans and other living beings under peril. Notably, some thresholds have been crossed. The concept of planetary boundaries attracted some sharp criticism on the choice of systems, thresholds, regional disparities, etc. But nonetheless, it provides a powerful visual tool to visualize the impact of humans on the Earth system processes. I would like to focus on one important critique. An international NGO, Oxfam, and subsequently the economist Kate Raworth observed that the planetary boundaries were setting a so-called environmental ceiling, but basic human needs such as housing, social equity, or education were unaccounted for. While adding these so-called social foundations into the picture, a donut emerged, which is conceived as a safe and just operating space for humanity. In other words, we should neither go below the social foundations nor exceed the ecological limits, but operate within this space. We face a so-called energy trilemma. Energy security is well known, and it is about energy supply and sources being available and reliable. Simply put, you want your electricity or fuel for your car whenever you need it. Relatively known is energy equity, which is about accessibility and affordability. In other words, you want the price of electricity or gasoline to be within your budget. And finally, environmental sustainability is about making energy green and clean. That is, you don't want your home lighting or your commute to pollute the environment. Now, satisfying all 3 requirements presents a tremendous challenge. hence a trilemma. Our conventional energy sources predominantly come from fossil fuels, such as coal, oil, and natural gas. Security of oil supply has been marred with conflicts and wars, for example, in the Middle East. Coal is cheap, but everything is extremely polluting, and it's a major contributor to climate change through emissions of carbon dioxide. Renewable energy from solar and wind are environmentally friendly, but are still relatively expensive, even though their costs have been steadily falling. For that, we must recognize that our economic system runs on energy to produce goods and services to satisfy human needs. But our economic system externalizes the costs by dumping waste and pollution into the environment at virtually no cost. The environment and the economic imperative of growth means that greater quantities of energy are required to keep the economy growing, all the while the negative impact on the environment escalates. An important consideration here is our consumption that goes beyond our needs into our wants. This is known as conspicuous consumption. It means that each of us, through our eating, clothing, transportation, entertainment, our lifestyle as a whole leaves a footprint on the environment because our myriad activities generate waste and pollution as a byproduct. And conspicuous consumption further means that we want to have more today than we had yesterday and have even more tomorrow. This sort of consumption turns the wheels of the economy. Another important point about our economic system is that it is a capitalist system, also known as neoliberalism, in that market forces of demand and supply determine the optimal allocation of resources. In this realm, corporations reign supreme. Their dominant algorithm is profit maximization. In other words, corporations are programmed to make money, essentially at the expense of everything else, and that includes the environment. The argument goes that because the environment does not have a price or property rights, it is effectively free for exploitation. Some argue that to prevent the damages, nature should be assigned property rights and prices. And here some efforts have been made in the form of accounting for ecosystem services. But then some argue that this leads to greater commodification of nature, bringing more of its systems under the human domain, and thereby exacerbating our impacts on the environment, resulting in yet greater degradation. Now, this realization about our economic system, and particularly about our conspicuous consumption, the logic of profit maximization, and the resulting environmental externalities tells us that something has to be done if we are to stay within the planetary boundaries and social foundations. But where do we begin? Do we begin with corporations or consumers, or rethink the economic system, or everything and everyone at the same time? Well, many answers are offered from different corners, but one thing is clear. We have to change our way of life, from eating to dressing to moving around to everything else we do, because all of our activities are entangled in the economic system that harms the environment. You can develop a brilliant mathematical model, design a perfect technical solution, or conduct a thrilling scientific experiment in the lab. All of this is, of course, of great value and should be done. However, these models, solutions, and experiments will have little impact if it turns out that humans will not implement them. Let's consider a very small and practical example: waste management. From the technical point of view, there are many solutions on how to deal with waste, such as recycling. But it remains a tremendous challenge to change human behavior. This is where social sciences and humanities come to find workable solutions. Another example is that of climate change, where there is a strong scientific proof, but many people fail to realize or believe it, which is why a whole new field of science communication emerged to tackle this challenge. As we see, the sustainability challenge, which is to meet our human needs within the ecological limits, is quite vast. Therefore, there is a critical need for experts and problem solvers, because quite literally, the fate of our humanity and our survival on the planet Earth is hanging in the balance. And this is not to mention the fate of other living beings. Each of us can do our share. Whatever your area of specialization or interest may be, know that you are already part of this system. And ask yourself at every step, every decision, every purchase, every action, how does it contribute to the sustainability challenge? Does it exacerbate it, or does it help reduce it?
How fascinating to hear about the energy trilemma. And that from an energy sustainability perspective, the fate of our humanity and our survival on planet Earth is quite literally hanging on the balance. Our next guest is Romina Velshi, President of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission and Chairperson of the Commission on Safety Standards for the International Atomic Energy Agency. She is trained as a professional engineer with over 35 years in positions at Canada's largest nuclear utility. She also serves on the board of directors for the Canadian Institute for Women in Engineering and Science and founded Driving Advancement for Women in Nuclear in 2019. She is a recipient of the 2011 Women in Nuclear Canada Leadership Award and is one of 150 Canadian women whose stories are compiled in Your Turn, a book published to mark Canada's 150th anniversary and inspire the next generation of women leaders.
Climate change is as a result of increased emission of greenhouse gases to the environment. And humans' contribution to these greenhouse gases is primarily from energy production and from agriculture. And we have all seen what climate change is doing to us. We have seen changes in weather patterns. We have seen more hurricanes, more tornadoes, more wildfires, famine, drought, flooding, and the list goes on. And it's recognized that all countries around the world have to do their part in ensuring that we are, if not reversing the trend of climate change, at least stabilizing it. And so for the energy sector, this is a huge challenge. And what is being accepted increasingly is that our source of energy has to change. Currently, 65% of energy comes from fossil fuels like coal, natural gas, oil in some cases. And there is recognition that we need more renewables and increasingly acceptance that nuclear power needs to play a much larger role when it comes to energy production. Currently, about 10% of nuclear power, of electricity comes from nuclear power, and that needs to change, not only to control climate change, but also to address the issue of energy poverty. There are almost 1 billion people, 1 billion people on this earth who don't have access to electricity. And again, there is an increased acceptance that nuclear power has to play a much larger role for addressing issues of climate change and for addressing issue of energy poverty. And coincidentally with this recognition of the role nuclear power has to play is the advancement of new technologies. Small modular reactor, SMR, a term that you've probably heard of, but if you haven't, you're going to hear about a whole lot more over the coming years. They're small, they're less than 300 megawatts, so about half the size of a unit behind me is how large they can get. They're small enough that you can actually pull them on a truck. They're modular, which means that they're manufactured in a factory. And so that reduces construction times, ensures greater quality. And they're called a reactor because the mechanism by which energy is produced is a nuclear reaction. These small modular reactors, none have really been built to date, promise to change, to transform energy sector. They're simpler, they're safer, and they're a lot more economical. And they don't necessarily need this large infrastructure of transmission lines and distribution lines. So for remote communities, for the developing world, there could be a tremendous source of energy. I believe these SMRs are going to transform the energy sector if they deliver on their promise. They will do to the energy sector what a smartphone has done to the telecommunications business. So SMRs, exciting technology, great opportunity for those of us in the industry to be here at this time when there is so much exciting work happening. Think of your periodic table, and every element is made up of protons and neutrons in the nucleus, and twirling around the nucleus are electrons. So for a given element, if the nucleus has an extra proton, that makes it an isotope of that particular element. So, for example, hydrogen, which is the simplest element that exists, if it has an extra proton in the nucleus, that becomes a deuterium. If it's got 2 extra neutrons, it becomes tritium. And the nuclear power plant behind me, besides producing electricity, also produces some isotopes. Tritium is one of them, and tritium is used for emergency lighting, whether it's exit signs, whether it's in an aircraft, in the cockpit for the digital displays. Another isotope that's also produced at these nuclear power plants is cobalt-60. And cobalt-60 is used for sterilization of medical equipment like gloves and masks, or for surgical instruments. And certainly during COVID, cobalt-60 has proven how essential it is for us to lead a safe life. But the more interesting technologies that are getting developed within the nuclear sector are some medical isotopes like molybdenum-99 and lutetium-177. These are used to treat cancer and heart diseases, both for diagnostic purposes as well as for therapeutic purposes. And when these radioisotopes get produced in a nuclear reactor, they're produced in large quantities, so they can be supplied globally. And within Canada is expecting to be the largest exporter of these radioisotopes. And we as the regulator are working very hard to make sure that they can be produced safely and can be delivered safely. And not only will this improve the quality of life, but also increase the life of those who've been hit by these sad diseases. There's going to be a great demand for STEM jobs in the future, and women need to play a large part. They need to have a voice at the table. Their perspectives are crucial to make sure that the right decisions are getting made, the right innovations are getting introduced. And women need to lift up half the sky. So I have been a very strong promoter of women in STEM from very early on in my career. I was one of the founding members of Women in Science and Engineering in Canada. And more recently, in my current role, I have been very active in setting up a Women in STEM initiative within my own organization. I have established a DAWN, Driving Advancement of Women in Nuclear, within the Canadian nuclear sector. And in the early part of this fall, I established an international gender champions group amongst the nuclear regulators, again, to increase the representation of women within the nuclear sector, because I think it is essential that we get more women within our organizations, within our sector. So some takeaways that I'd like to leave you with. 1, dream big. As Oscar Wilde said, shoot for the moon, and if you miss, you'll hit a few stars. So pursue your dreams, follow your interests. You're going to be in these careers for decades. So find something that you love. The second, I often hear people say, well, from a young age, I knew I wanted to be a neurologist, or I wanted to be an astronaut, or I wanted to be a computer scientist. Well, I think for most of us, though, we don't have a clue of what we want to be when we grow up. And even when we're grown up, we still don't know. So don't despair. There are so many opportunities. My advice is keep your options open. Don't drop out of math and sciences in high school, because this is where the jobs are. And you will find your niche. There are a myriad opportunities there. The third one is surround yourself with a support network, folks that are going to help you meet your aspirations, who are going to pull you along, push you along, take you along. 4 is learning. Never stop learning. As I get reminded all the time, the education we get, the formal training, is good for only a couple of years, given the pace of change we're going through. So always be sharp, keep on learning. And my last advice in all of this is have fun. Life is short. Enjoy what you're doing and work hard, because there is no getting around hard work. I wish you all the very best.
We look forward to seeing how small modular reactors are going to transform the energy sector in the future. There is an ongoing realization that every deliberate act leads to environmental degradation, jeopardizes human beings and societies near and far. But it is difficult to argue that the environment isn't a public good. And in this case, Islam is very clear. It is the duty of every Muslim to ensure that a common resource, like the environment, is used in a responsible and sustainable manner. Our next segment is on Islam and science.
Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, alayhi wasallam, is noted to have once said, "There is no joy in life unless 3 things are available: clean fresh air, abundant pure water, and fertile land." Our environment is a largely self-regulating and balanced system. It provides for all life forms that exist on this planet by offering them adequate resources to ensure their survival. However, over time, humans have managed to disrupt this delicate balance. We humans have exploited these resources to satisfy not just our needs, but also our greed. Human ventures have discounted the value of the future and of nature, and thus have had a destructive effect on nature's resources. Pollution, mass deforestation, lowered biodiversity, climate change, and the exhaustion of natural resources are just a few problems that we humans have created. In Muslim traditions, the human condition is not separated from the natural order. In the Holy Quran, Allah reminds man of his responsibility as a trustee, or a Khalifa of Allah's creation. As a trustee, we have a duty to care and protect the environment. In Surah 30, Ayat 41 of the Holy Quran, Allah says, "Corruption has appeared in both land and sea, because of what people's own hands have brought, so that they may taste something of what they have done, so that hopefully they will turn back." Care of the environment, in its comprehensive meaning, is a duty of trusteeship which humankind owes by virtue of its vicegerency over creation. Each generation is, thus, ethically bound to leave behind a wholesome, sustainable, social and physical environment for future generations as a mark of respect for the bounty Allah has bestowed on us. Environmental stewardship is our collective responsibility, one that we ignore to our peril.
Our next segment covers an exciting weekly rundown of global news on emerging technology, scientific trends, and other extraordinary advancements, narrated by artificial intelligence. These have been handpicked just for you.
Scientists in Israel have reversed the aging process in humans for the first time. As people age, telomeres shorten. These are the ends of a strand of DNA and are replaced with senescent cells that prevent regeneration. Increasing telomere length and removing senescent cells is the focus of many anti-aging studies. The scientists found that giving pure oxygen to older people inside a hyperbaric chamber increased telomere length by 20% after just 3 months of treatment. Previous studies have already shown cognitive benefits using the therapy. The therapy achieved significant telomere elongation at rates far beyond any other currently known interventions. BMW has developed an electric wingsuit capable of soaring through the sky at speeds of up to 186 miles per hour. Professional skydiver and base jumper Peter Saltzman, who was part of the development process, completed the maiden flight over the mountains of Austria after being dropped at 10,000 feet by a helicopter. The e-wingsuit is powered by a chest-mounted rig that can produce thrust for up to 5 minutes. The FBI has collected billions of pages of files over its existence. When designing a new facility to house about 2 billion pages in 360,000 bins, the FBI decided that manually retrieving data from the records was almost impossible due to the size of the collection. After exploring various solutions, the FBI chose to employ 140 robots to automatically file and retrieve records. The robots will streamline the data retrieval process and also optimize storage space by eliminating aisles for human access. Their software only tracks record and bin numbers, which means that they won't have direct access to the records themselves. Diamonds are usually created from pressure and heat, far beneath the Earth's surface over billions of years. Scientists in Australia have created 2 types of diamond at room temperature in minutes by applying immense pressure in a twisting force to carbon. The process was able to create diamonds hard enough to be used to cut through ultra-solid materials on mining sites. 2 centuries ago, it was established that the average human body temperature was 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, or 37 degrees Celsius. Scientists have noticed a drop in average body temperature in healthy adults in the UK and US over the last 2 centuries. More recently, over the last 2 decades, a similar drop in body temperature occurred in the Tsimane indigenous people in the Bolivian Amazon. Despite many theories, it is unknown why body temperature dropped in any of these populations.
Thank you again for watching this week. We have heard today the importance of lifelong learning given how rapidly this world is changing. Our exploration continues next week and we look forward to seeing you for the next episode. Finally, let's hear what Maulana Hazimam said about the environment and energy.
Among other things, new technologies can help us address growing environmental urgencies. I think, for example, of the pressing need for energy and water conservation, and of the risks associated with climate change, weather extremes, and geological instability. Used alertly and intelligently, new technologies can help us cope with bewildering environmental challenges.